Greetings adventurers and welcome to the MicFlayers podcast. My name is Martin O'Dwyer and I'll be your host for today's video. And in today's video I'm going to show you my simple and quick method for planning a session, whether that's an in-campaign session or a one-off one-shot session. So let's jump into it. Hey folks, so we're over here now on a fresh Google Doc, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how I basically set up and start planning for a session. So here you can see we have a title already with the Haunted Bog. Basically I'm going to run you through a similar one to a session I ran for my own party in an earlier part of our campaign. So usually when I'm starting the planning process, I'll do these three, which is the aim of the session, the number of players and level, particularly useful if you're doing a one-shot, and then the quest overview. So each of these, this is basically just what I as a DM want to accomplish and get done in the session. This is just a guide for myself, and then in terms of number and level of players that I'm dealing with, to keep that in mind. And then the quest overview is basically what I consider like a high level, almost like pitch or single sentence summary of the session that's going to happen. So we'll go ahead and fill these in and we'll be right back. Okay, so we're back now. We have the aim of the session, number of players and level, and the quest overview all filled in. So the aim of the session, as we can see here, is to discover what is causing the disappearances in town. The number of players and level, I've got 4 players, level 5, which would have been around the level that I would have brought my own party through this particular quest. And the quest overview is the village of Reedton has been plagued by nightmares and the disappearance of villagers on foggy days. No one knows what is happening and they've sent for help from the nearest city, Caharrock. The party is sent to investigate the disappearances and stop whatever is causing them. So very, very simple, classic D&D thing. In my mind, and what I intend for the actual villain to be would be a green hag. So villain, green hag, and then from here, basically, once we have the kind of general, I would say, like outline of the session or kind of building blocks of the session put in place, we can then move on to like more detailed things like any kind of big set piece events you have planned that you want to make sure you hit to really set the theme and the mood, and then as well any like NPCs or resources available to the party. So we'll be back in just a sec with that all filled in and I can show you exactly what I'm talking about. Okay, and we're back now with the set pieces, important information, resources and NPCs all filled in. So set pieces for this, I want to basically start off small, and like a slasher movie basically, you build and the rate at which the creepy things happens increases in tempo until you reach the end where it's revealed what it is. So for set pieces, I have a teenage girl from the village has disappeared walking her younger brother home from fishing in the river near the bog. The second one, the party meet a strange old woman who lives in a hut on the edge of town. On the third night, the party is in town. Fog descends on the town and the voices of the lost can be heard in the mist blanketing the village. So we're really going to go for that creep factor here. Then important information, this will be information that the party can gain either just through investigating around the town or talking to specific NPCs. So we have the first disappearance happened about a month ago between the bog and the woods nearby. The oldest person to disappear was 16 years old. Nearly every other disappearance has been of a child under 12. After the first disappearance, strange laughter was heard from the area of the forest/bog. And finally, local children have heard the voices of the disappeared calling to them on foggy nights if they're inside. So we're trying to use this info to hint at what our villain is, which in this case is a green hag, which is a creature that abducts children and eats them in order to reproduce. So resources we have a tavern in the town. I envision this being a pretty small village, so you have a tavern, it's sort of mid to low tier. The hop store run by a male gnome called Cyrus. We have a general store run by a human female in her late 30s called Sarah Fields. We have a blacksmith's, Grimna's, ran by a female half-orc called Grimna. And then we have a herbalist's called Growing Strong, ran by a male elf called Arelon She. Then we have a start list of NPCs. I would probably include 1 or 2 more if I was writing this for a real session, but these 4 you could get away with easy. So we have Cyrus the tavern owner, Sarah Fields the general store owner, Grimna the blacksmith, and then we have Arelon She the herbalist. So what we have here is basically the main kind of bones of the session that we want to write here. So what we would need to do in addition to this would be maybe do a description of the village itself, just to really set the scene. We do have a video on improving your descriptions on the channel. I would highly recommend it. We have one, so you would set the scene with the village it's in, which will be Reedton, which in my campaign, Reedton was this village that was set on the edge of a large lake, in a very, very kind of boggy, marshy area. I believe it was called the Dragon Maw Lake, was the lake. And lots of strange things happened, and again, people were disappearing, and it did end up being a green hag. So just all we've got here is we've got the aim, we've got the quest overview, we've got the villain, the set pieces we want to make sure there are, and then we have important information, resources, and NPCs. And if you follow this format for any session you want to plan, it'll be very, very easy to hammer out the skeleton of the session, hammer out the rough shape of it, and basically get yourself with a rough and ready plan of what to go by. And as well, this may not suit your style of DMing. It depends on how you DM. As a DM, what I normally do is I'll do a plan like this that I can refer back to, just to make sure that I'm kept on the straight and narrow, kept in line, and going where I want to go during a session, not getting distracted. And then what I will do is I will refer back and forth to that, and I will have sections of prose written, usually for the important information section, which will be a bit longer descriptions or descriptive text of what's going on, or where they are, or things they find, or things they might find strange or unusual. You could also include this, change this and call this clues, particularly for this one. So yeah, you can just very, very quickly hammer out the shape of a session with a framework like these. And then one thing I probably would put in after this then would be, I would put in combat encounter. If I could spell combat encounter correctly, that would be awesome. But just combat encounter, and I would put in here combat encounter green hag, and in the original session I ran this for, the green hag was living in a house hidden by fog on the river that could be submerged and emerge from it depending on the tide. Sorry, not in the river, rather in the lake. So it was an aquatic house basically built on top of stones in the lake that she was hiding in. And when it was foggy, then she would come out and kidnap people from the village and bring them back and devour them to reproduce. But yeah, that's pretty much how I plan and get set up for sessions. So it's really easy to kind of recap it all again. First of all, we try and figure out what the aim of our session is. From there, how many players and their level that we have, just so you know how to tailor and scale that session in terms of difficulty. Then I like to do a quest overview, which is basically like a high level overview, 1 to 2 sentences that broad strokes explains what's going to happen and what's going on in this session. I will usually put in either the monster, the villain, whatever else. Sometimes I'll even put in quest line, just so I know which quest line I'm on. From there, I'll include set pieces, like things I have to hit or really, really want to hit to really sell the tone that I'm trying to sell and set the mood that I'm trying to set. And then important information. This will be stuff to help the party along in either in their investigation or in the story, and trying to locate and get to the bottom of what has been going on here. And then finally, I'll include resources, NPCs, and the combat encounter itself. So in this town, because it's quite a small town, I just have the tavern, a general store, a blacksmiths, and a herbalists. And then for NPCs, like 4 to 5 NPCs, particularly for a village, is more than enough really for a small village like this. That's more than enough. You basically just need someone who can cover the basic needs of someone in the town, which is why you've tavern owner somewhere where people, there's almost always a tavern, and then we have a general store owner, a blacksmith, and a herbalist. So those would be the kind of like your 4 main kind of areas covered over. And then in terms of combat encounters, what I'll do a lot of the time with combat encounters is I will say like combat, like in this one, combat encounter green hag, and then I will do a description of where I foresee the combat encounter happening. Now, this is not a hard and fast rule written in stone that we stick to, but just in terms of, for me, for envisioning the plot and the story, this is where I see this encounter happening. And I'll give a description of that, and then I will kind of slightly plan the moves ahead of time for my creature, particularly if it's an intelligent villain like a green hag. If it's something like a white dragon, or it's more kind of almost animalistic, that's kind of, they're not going to be quite so intelligent with their moves. They're just going to go for whatever is the biggest threat or what's hurt them most recently. So yeah, that's basically how I plan my sessions. I'll just go through with some very, very brief bullet points that I can then refer to as I plow through the rest of the session, and kind of I can refer to my outline, come back to what I'm doing with narration wise or description wise with my party, and then this just helps to keep me on track. This isn't necessarily my Bible. Quite frequently I just throw stuff in there while I'm improvising. This is a framework basically to keep me on track that I can improvise on top of and provide additional context or information or descriptions as needed for my party. But guys, that's pretty much it for today's video. I hope this is helpful. I think something like this will be particularly helpful if you're new to DMing and new to planning your sessions. In fact, I actually normally don't do this on my PC. I actually normally write these out because I find that I get the creative juices flowing better if I handwrite my session plans, and then I can kind of leaf between the pages as I'm DMing, and I find it really works well for me. And so much of DMing is really just finding what works from you, taking bits and pieces from other people that kind of show you the way to do it, and making that all fit into what is uniquely your style as a DM. So just as a kind of final word on this, this is just a way that you can plan. It's a way that I plan my sessions, and I have found it useful for me. So I thought it might be useful for other people as well, because I know I struggled quite a lot with planning my sessions early on and planning what to do and how do you plan a session, and it can be a struggle sometimes. So I hope if you found this video that you found this particular framework for setting up your session useful. If not, please by all means leave us a comment below and let us know what you did and didn't find good about this, or any kind of feedback or comments you have are more than welcome here. So guys, I'm going to say thank you so much for tuning in to today's video. As always, you can follow us on socials. You can follow me on Twitter at So Sorry It's Over. You can follow the podcast on Twitter at MicFlayers Pod. And yes, from next week we should be back with the podcast. I believe it should be next week, at the very latest the week after, but Connor is back, so we will be back with our long form podcast again. I'll still probably do a couple of shorter videos as that goes on, just kind of toss one out here and there, just if the mood strikes me. But yes, from either next week or the week after, we will be back with the MicFlayers podcast in full. I'm very, very excited about it, and I hope you guys are too. So hopefully we will see you on a return episode of the MicFlayers podcast, which should be a very fun episode. We can catch back up with Connor and everything that's gone on the last while, and kind of talk about what's gone on in D&D. But guys, once again, thank you so much for watching. Have a great day and keep playing D&D.